Support the Amigos podcast and keep the Amiga goodness flowing for just $1 a month. Visit our page at patreon.com/AmigosPodcast.
Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
Amigos, the podcast about everything Amiga. Amigos is a proud member of the Throwback Network, your home for quality retro podcasts. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron Dowdy and John Bodovkar Schaller.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And thanks for listening. Aaron, today we are going to talk about Kickoff 2.
All right.
But before we do, there's a couple other segments we've got. First of all, I'd just like to thank, I think his name is Zappy, but it's spelled Zapiy. And he's one of the guys over at Retro Video Gamer. And they've been posting our latest episodes on their site. You can check them out at retrovideogamer.co.uk.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Now, some feedback from our last episode. You know, we talked about Zool last episode, and Dreamcatcher, who is one of our return feedback givers.
Is that spelled gangsta style?
Yeah, it is. Okay. He's straight out of, not sure where he's straight out of.
Compton?
Possibly not, because this comes from the English Amiga boards. So, but he says, straight out of Hampton. Zool, what a tedious, mean-spirited game.
Wow.
He liked it just as much as we did.
I didn't think it was that bad, did I?
He said, you're punished with every step you take, and it runs so uncontrollably fast. Every one of them is a misstep.
That's sort of kind of true, yeah.
I felt dizzy just watching your YouTube playthrough, especially where the part where the protagonist, definitely not an ant, splits into like a bleary-eyed after image. Yeah. Could someone pass me a sick bag?
You know, the funny thing is, when that first came out, I thought that was a pretty cool effect. But I don't know. I never understood the point exactly, except they give you extra shots or whatever. It didn't help that much.
No, invincibility for a short time would have been much, much better.
Oh, yes. You ain't kidding.
We also got quite a lengthy message from Anthony, and Anthony is over at thegurumeditation.org, which,
Love that.
Amiga-related site. He's a great episode, as always. Just want to fill out some information on the 500 a bit more. He says, in truth, all Amigas came with real-time clocks, even the 1000. They start incrementing time from the moment they are switched on until switched off, and noting time and date a file is created or changed as part of the Amiga file system. The issue the Amiga 1000, 500, 600, and 1200 have is there's no way to continue incrementing time and date once switched off. So without that, they start at the same time every time they are switched on. So, you know, in a way, you were right. There's no real-time
battery
clock.
Backed up clock. You remember the old PCs when you first got the first thing you do every time, right? You hit enter. The thing comes up. It says enter the date, enter the time. It's the same thing. Right. But that's not a battery backed up clock. I guess that should have been a little more.
Yeah. And he said that there were several battery back clocks that were released. He said that for the 1000, the battery back clock add-ons attached to the parallel port of the mouse port, or as an add-on to the Starboard 2 RAM expansion. Mm-hmm. And then the 1200 had the clock port for those expansions, though most of us got battery-backed clocks on their accelerators. So that's a little bit about the real-time clock. And he also talked a little bit about trapdoor RAM. He said early 500s released with 1.2, but the other interesting thing is that the really early ones had a Commodore key instead of an Amiga key on the left side of the keyboard.
Interesting. It's funny. I've never seen one that had a 1.2, as we discussed last time, and I've certainly never seen that. So that would be, I bet that's probably a pretty rare item. Maybe not, but I've never seen one.
Yeah, and he said they were also released with the same Agnes chip as the 1000, which could access 512K RAM, though they knew the next Angus for which the 500 was designed would address 1 megabyte chip RAM.
Which I guess that's the difference between the OCS and the ECS.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me at least. Yeah. And he said the 500 plus placed 1 megabyte of RAM on the motherboard and supported an additional 1 megabyte in the trapdoor expansion. This allowed this Model 500 to support the 2 megabyte chip in memory, which was the same as the 3000 and the 6000.
I wonder if we got the 500 plus in the States.
That's a good question.
Because I ran in circles where guys had a lot of Amigas and they were very popular, but these are small circles, granted. And there was an Amiga store here in town. And I personally never saw a 500 plus. I heard about them. I read about them in the magazines. That doesn't mean they weren't here, because it's not like we're in New York here. But I never saw one. And they sound real nice.
Yeah,
That sounds great. I wish I had one at that point.
And it's kind of funny. I did. Oh, thank you again, Anthony, for that feedback.
Thanks, Anthony, man.
I did a little research, and by that I mean I went to Wikipedia.
Well done.
And I just because we were talking about what amount of RAM did these machines come with originally? When they were released, and so we first talked about the Amiga 500, which was released in October 1987, and it came with 512 out of the gate,
right, up
to 9 megabytes. So it's very big. The Amiga 2000, which was released, I guess before the 500, but it was the big boy version of the Amiga, came with 1 megabyte, but it still only had an upper limit of 9 megabytes. Now, the Mac Plus, which was a year older, January 1986, came with 1 megabyte out of the gate. And as far as I could tell, it had the most RAM of any computer, on release of anything from that time period. But it could only go up to 4 megabytes. Nothing could go up to what the Amiga could go up to. The 520 ST was released in June of 1985. So we're talking about 2 years before the Amiga 500. And it came with 512. So it came with a lot of RAM for a machine from 1985. But it could only be expanded up to 1 megabyte.
Really?
Yeah. The IBM computer, the PC from that time period was the PS2. And it was released in April of 1987 with 512K.
97.
87.
Okay.
Sorry, 87.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, that would not be of that time period. And finally, your beloved Coco 3 was released July of 1986, and it came with 128K of RAM, and you could expand that all the way up to 512K.
Impressive, eh?
Yeah.
Hey, the Coco was the little computer that could. I love that machine. It gets a lot of hate, the trash 80 stuff. And overseas, it was the Dragon, which I found out, again, this is from another podcast called Floppy Days. Great podcast. And they were talking about the Dragon versus the Coco, and the fact that basically the Coco's entire makeup was the standard chips that came with the 6800 chip, right? So, it wasn't a clone. Anyone could make it. It was just standard stuff to make the computer. So the Dragon's not really a clone. But they're both good machines. And for that time, they were, of course, you could consider that was 86, and the 1000 came out in, I think, 85. It crushes the Coco in every conceivable way. So it just goes to show you how far ahead of its time the 1000 was.
All right. Up next, we got some con news. Aaron, what do you have?
I was just nosing around earlier today and noticed that the Amy West 2015 show is going on. Actually started yesterday, October 14th. It's running through the 18th, which is this weekend. We'll probably get this show out in time for anyone to hear it to head down. The show is in Sacramento, California. It's at the Holiday Inn Express, 2224 Auburn Boulevard in Sacramento, California. Like I said, if you're somewhere in town, I've heard it's a really good show. And, hey, who doesn't want to go out to an Amiga show? I'd like to go to one myself. The closest thing that comes to us, really, that's classic computer related is up in Columbus. And it's not Amiga only, so I'd love to hit an Amiga show. So if you're lucky enough to be out that way, check it out. And if you go, drop us a line. Let us know how it went.
Awesome. This will be the bumper. All right, it's time to talk about our game of the week.
Oh, boy.
So this game is Kickoff 2. The Kickoff franchise is a series of football simulation computer games first released in 1989. Kickoff, the first game in the series, was designed by Dino Dini, I think that's how you pronounce his name.
It is exactly correct, sir.
Excellent. And was released by Anco for the Amiga and the Atari ST in 1989. But we're not talking about Kickoff. We're talking about Kickoff 2. Kickoff 2 was released in 1990. And Aaron, what do you got on Kickoff 2?
Well, it's funny that I actually had heard of this game, and the main reason is there's a podcast called Retro Asylum out of the UK. Great podcast.
I enjoy it very much.
And Dino Dini is one of their main sponsors. I hear his name. Oh, yeah. Dino Dini. They mentioned him almost every episode. In fact, as I recall, he saved the podcast at one point with a contribution to keep them liquid over there.
Wow. So,
and I from knowing about him, I'd heard about the game and had some knowledge of it. Again, full disclaimer, as I mentioned last week, I don't know much about soccer. I don't know anything about World Cup soccer. I don't know the rules of soccer except for the general rules. I've never played soccer in a league, and I don't necessarily like to watch soccer. That much said, I'll play me a game or two of soccer, and I had heard of Kickoff 2, and believe it or not, after playing it, I did remember having played it back in the day. So I had a little bit of experience with it. You mentioned that that Dino did do it. Dino pretty much was Soccer Man. In fact, as far as I could tell, pretty much all he did in his career were soccer games. I've got a list here somewhere. Let me dig it up here of what he had pulled off. Basically, he's mostly known for, guess what? This game. He did Kickoff 2. He did the at least some of the expansions. I couldn't verify that he'd done all the expansions because apparently there are a ton of expansions, and I'd listed all the ones I could find, but I'm not sure that there weren't more. Dean did. He transferred over to another software company to do a game called Goal. He actually, breaking news, as of I think it just came out like in the past month or two, he is actually making a new soccer game. I think it's called Kickoff Revival, and it's coming out for the PS4 of all things. Yeah, I looked it over. It's one of those. It's the classic thing. It's going to be in the spirit of the original. It's going to be in 3D. Yada yada yada. It's supposed to come out, I think, next year. And this the announcement just came out the other day, so it's as timely as today's headlines. I don't know if he might have made the announcement to coincide with that tournament you spoke about last week. There is a tournament with this game involved. Apparently, it happens every year. Like Boat said last week, the 15th one's taking place in November, I believe it was, in Dublin. This game still gets played. Apparently, it's a pretty popular game overseas. The funny thing about it is, I tried to do a lot of boning up on this game because, like I said, it was a foreign game to me, no pun intended. One thing I came across was that there are a lot of people that fight about this game in Sensible Soccer a lot. I don't know if you came across any of that.
Oh, yeah.
And having played both, and I am certainly not a judge of these things, and not knowing enough about soccer to really make a comment, but I know people are very passionate about this. I read a blog from a chap who I guess worked he worked for Amiga Power, and he had been an editor there, and I guess that he didn't like this game. He was a Sensible Soccer guy. In fact, he went to work for Sensible at one point, Sensible Software, and they were killing this guy. He's been embroiled in this big thing for years and years, and there were fights back and forth about what the game was rated and how well it scored with critics, and I'll checked a couple other places and forums, and it's amazing that I kid you not, as recently as this year, people are still fighting about this game in Sensible Soccer. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen.
And Dino doesn't shy away from controversy either. He is. I've read some interviews. He did one in Retro Gamer back in 2004, and he basically just flat out said, "Hey, Sensible Soccer would not exist if it were not for Kickoff. You know, they stole all the best ideas. They made it easier, so more people could get into it." And he kind of claimed that he invented the overhead soccer genre. If I had spent, he's a one-man development team. He created the Kickoff series, and I'm sure that he's very passionate about it. If I ever did something like that, and another game came along that was similar and stole a lot of my thunder, I'm sure that I would be perturbed also. But it is definitely a controversial subject with any kind of football or soccer loving Amiga fan.
It's funny you should mention the fact that he says he's excited. I had read he was a controversial fellow, and maybe this was, I don't know when he's even commented on this recently, but maybe he still comments on it all the time. But a couple of things I read had mentioned a game. I think it was like Micro Pro Soccer.
Yeah, that predated,
that had an overhead view and stuff. And a lot of people are saying, "Well, you just got this from here."
And he said that he was the first person to have Aftertouch, and there was another game, I think a Japanese overhead soccer game that called it like Banana Shot or something like that, but it was basically the same thing. That all that information might be wrong, but the general idea is sound. And so what didn't help was, I guess, in Amiga Power, they published a letter that was supposedly written by him, but not actually written by him.
Right.
That makes him out to be some sort of a really whiny kind of crybaby, when it turns out he didn't write that letter at all. They published it without doing possibly the due diligence they should have, and that really, I guess, reading his blog, he said that really took him to a dark place for many years, because, he was perceived by the entire Amiga community, which, read these magazines, as being this kind of spoiled, crybaby that, when things, when Sensible Soccer came out and it didn't go his way, he got mad. But that's, if not for things like this, what would the internet be good for?
And it's funny because even this is an argument stretched so far back that I was looking at Newsgroup. It's been around forever. The blog I read was from 90, and God knows where that had came from.
Right.
So you're talking that alone is you're looking at 20, 25 years of whining and back and forth. But then again, hey, Super Nintendo Genesis and Atari Commodore. There's a lot of healthy feuds out there.
Oh yeah,
and I'm sure at some point we'll get to Sensible Soccer, and then maybe we can come to some. I'm certainly not going to weigh in on which one's better right now. I can tell you that it's too early to say. Let's just put it that way. As Boat mentioned, this was put out by an outfit called Anco. I looked over a list of what they'd done, and honestly, I don't recognize any of it except for the Kickoff series. And Boat, I'm guessing you wouldn't recognize it either. There's a lot of stuff on here. They did some stuff like Death Trap, Death Bots.
It all kind of sounded like your kind of Apogee, shareware titles.
Well, Karate King, karting Grand Prix. It does. Hey, this stuff might be great. Again, I don't want to sit here and kill them. I've not heard of any of these games.
Yeah, it's possible that these games might be great.
Kickoff, the series, and the Player Manager series, which I'd heard of, and I remember getting and not knowing what the hell they were.
Yeah.
So, I guess the graphics guy on this was a dude named Steve Screech. It's an awesome name.
That is an awesome name.
He did a lot of soccer stuff. He did a basketball game called Tip Off, and some sort of shooting game called HR 35 Fighter Mission, according to Lemon Amiga. Again, with the exception of the Kickoffs, I've not played Tip Off or Fighter Mission. I believe this guy was involved in a new version of Kickoff that was like Kickoff Ultimate or something like that. I think he was trying to do a revival around 2002. I read somewhere, and I guess it wasn't very good.
Well, it's funny because in that 2004 Retro Gamer article, Dino said that he was working on a new game. Now, I don't know if he did something between there and this thing coming out for the PS4. Did you see anything about that?
The Kickoff has had about 1 million incarnations. That's why it's tough to follow. It's had so many. I mean, there's Kickoff, Kickoff 2, Kickoff 3. There's Kickoff 2002. It didn't sell very well, and it was, according to what I read, it was the last thing that Anco did. I guess they had planned a 2004 release, and it got canned.
Well, see, Dino had left Anco by that point.
Oh yeah, This was just. I don't know. I mean, he did Goal,
and that was not Anco. That was somebody else.
He went to Virgin.
Virgin, right?
He left and went to Virgin. And Goal was pretty well received. Here's what I was talking about. Kickoff 3 was developed by Screech. And it did not do well. It did not do as well as Kickoff 2. By then, Dino had skipped town.
Yeah.
There are a ton of extra data discs and whatnot for this thing. I couldn't find them all. I don't think. Maybe I did. I don't know. It was Kickoff 2. Then there's World Cup 90. Then there's a version with, if you've got a mega memory. Then there's Giants of Europe, which is a data disc. I was told that this has European teams, the big ones, with the fully fleshed out with names and colors and whatnot. There's something called the Final Whistle. One of these added a ref that would run around the field. It would do cards, yellow and red cards. And I guess all these had minor tweaks and stuff. There was one called Return to Europe. Again, I guess it's adding European teams. Winning Tactics, I believe, was a expansion to the CPU. One of these did an extra upgrade to the computer's logic when you played the computer. There's a Super League expansion disc, and there's one called Maths disc. I'm going to assume that that's some kind of stat-related disc.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun.
Now, this is what I found. I don't know if these are all of them or not. I don't. And I looked. I tried to find a full list, and I had a heck of a time. So if someone out there has more, maybe
what
let me
this
know.
reminds me of is, we call it DLC now, but I can't think. Can you think of another game with this many, data discs later on?
The
for sale?
ones that came to mind were like Earl Weaver Baseball used to do the data disc thing. Some early sports games you would have Micro Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, but it has two.
Right, I'm just saying, but it was on the C64 there were more, I believe. Mm-hmm. It's unusual to have this many, but this is a really popular game. Mm-hmm. It's still around, and I know there are hacks and mods out there as well for it. Now, that much said, the game itself, I fired this thing up. The first time I had a chance to fire it up, it was emulated. I was like, let's just check this out, because I had a spare moment. And I fired it up and grabbed my stick and sat down to play it. And just played it. I just picked an average game, because the game's got a lot of options. It was so fast that I thought the emulation was bad. I thought, this is almost unplayable. So I'm going to pop back over to the proper Amiga, and I fired it up on there. Nope. It's a fast, chaotic romp of a game. Mm-hmm. With maybe you had better luck than I did in terms of actually trying to figure out a strategy to play it. I tried to pass and work strategy to a certain degree, and it just seemed almost, it was insane. It was so fast. Now, he's right. Maybe they slowed it down with Sensible Soccer and people liked it more. I would like it slower. It was too fast for me.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever go into the options and slow the game down?
I went to the options and changed and fooled around with pretty much all the settings, but it was still almost chaotic to me. What did you think, Bo?
Well, I've played Sensible Soccer.
Okay.
I played it when it came out on the Xbox 360. So I kind of had a small idea of what I was in for. These games are not meant to be pick up and play. These are games that people devote months and months and months just to get a working idea of how the game moves and how your guys react to different things. And so, it's programmed to be difficult, and that doesn't mesh with how games are these days, or even how most retro games are. You know, most retro games, they're meant to be pick up and play. You're immediately out of the gate, and you can do something that feels like you're doing something good. I am terrible at Kickoff 2. I have never scored a goal in a match.
Me either.
But I have scored one goal in practice. And, you know, even getting to the goal where you can get a clear shot on the goal is very difficult. You know, you control the ball, but you don't really control the ball. You know, it floats out in front of you. And if you bob and weave, the ball will go in one direction and you'll go in the other direction. I tried to find strategy online for this game. There is not much. I was expecting, with the game as popular as this, for there to be a bunch of guides, you know, contemporary guides written for people wanting to get into the game. And I found one thing on Lemon Amiga that said that the guy had spent the last 3 months and he finally now felt like he knew enough to write a beginner's guide. You know, I watched a lot of YouTube videos, which were just, I was hoping again for some sort of a beginner's guide, but a lot of them were just, you know, they'd have music playing in the background and they'd show a bunch of different kinds of goals without information on how to actually do it. So that, combined with my general ignorance of how soccer tactics work, different formations and things like that, it was not a positive outcome. However, I did enjoy that there was no offside rule in this game. I don't know if you noticed that.
I know that there was a rule that was added with an expansion. I believe it was the same one that added the ref.
Okay.
And then I read a review of or I watched a video of a guy playing it, and he said he always turned it off. So I'm guessing, I don't know if that's normal.
Because, you know, offside is you know, where you kick the ball and it's somehow ahead of the other team. I don't really understand how it works, but when you turn that off, you can just boot the ball the other side of the field. Everybody runs there and everybody has a good time. I always turn that off in hockey games too.
Yeah. Well, in hockey, I have a rough idea of how it works, and this I had no idea how it worked.
And so, you know, that was a positive. You know, did you try any of the different pitches? The
I
wet,
did.
the soggy, and it's kind of neat how, you know, the graphics change. You know, you get the mud around the goals whenever it's wet. So that's kind of cool. One thing I didn't realize, but I read in a review, was that there is instant replay. At any time you can reload the last 10 seconds of a match. Did you know that?
Yeah. I saw that. It's one of the options too, where you can, which is cool.
Yeah. I can't think of any other sports game that had that ever. You know, that's not contemporary, or even contemporary games
that had instant replay. Oh, there's been tons and tons.
Like what?
I think TV Sports had it. Actually,
it doesn't have replay on demand. You can't hit a button and bring back the last 10 seconds of anything.
TV Sports Football doesn't have it. I could have sworn it had it.
Well, I don't know about football, but basketball sure doesn't.
Like, geez, you guys, there are some, but I will say, and sometimes you can even save them, you know, to a disc. It was a nice ad. I like the fact that the expansion disc really fleshed it out. You know, if I was really into soccer, it's neat that you can play. Like, I watch a lot of guys playing this because since I suck so bad, I wanted to see what it looked like when someone knew what they were doing. Well, for starters, honestly, I've watched people play this, and I can't see what they're doing any different than what I. That's what it was maddening. But they were like, they were getting real excited, and they were talking about this. But I guess if you could associate the guys on the screen with players, and I like the idea that you could say, take a World Cup from 90, and like I heard a guy talking about the different teams that were in the game, and this team didn't do that well this year, and this one did, and this one played good on wet ground, and I guess that's all sort of in there. That's kind of neat. But I mean, and I'm not going to sit here and kill this game. I don't feel like I could kill this game. I'll be honest with you. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was not good. That much said, I'm going to plead ignorance on part of it, and I'm going to assume that there is some method, unlike, say, wrestling, our wrestling game, where I just assumed there was no strategy at all. It was just random. I'm going to go on the assumption that despite not seeing it, that there is some strategy to get better at this game because it's so popular. I looked at all the reviews when it came out. They were all super positive. I mean, I like the look. It's a good-looking game. I like the overhead. It works well. I think graphically, the little radar screen is obvious. I don't know. I didn't need that.
Well, it was hard for me. I mean, if you're looking at that radar screen and you look away from what you're doing, it's really hard to. I mean, obviously it's a skill, but I think that the people that are really good at this game just see it in such a different way than you and I see it. to them it all makes sense, whereas to us it's kind of like when you watch NASCAR or some sport and you hear people saying all this stuff, and but I think that I'm willing to. I feel like if I was younger and I really wanted to get into it, I could find myself getting into this if I had buddies that played it. But as it is now, I don't think I'll go back to it, because I think half of the fun is being part of a group of people that are learning it at the same time, and trying to beat each other.
For me, I'm not going to compare it to Sensible Soccer, another soccer game. The overhead view and the gameplay, the thing that came to my mind was a game called Speedball 2. We haven't reviewed that, but it's an excellent game. It's out for a bunch of systems. It's an overhead view of guys on a court, and it's a similar type game that you throw the ball around and you're trying to score a goal. I can control that. I can use strategy. I can see what's developing. And it was more fun for me. Yeah. This was so manic. I mean, I swear to you, it was so. I turned everything down as low as I could get it, so I could just have it. I get a grasp of what was happening. But I could not. I could not develop any strategies or develop any. And I played the heck out of this game too. I really tried to get into it. I just. It just didn't do it for me.
I could never figure out what was going on with the corner kick. The box pops up with the arrows and you select that thing that you want. But it seemed like, and they said that it's all dependent on how hard or how long you press down the button.
Right.
But it seems like every time I would press even a little bit or a lot, he would just kick it and it would go off the other side and have to throw it back in.
So. Right. Well, I mean, there is some touch. I didn't have too much trouble with that. And I could come close. I could get to a scoring opportunity sometimes. And I never was able to score, but I've read this after I played it. I read that you will have more luck if you come at the goal from an angle, which I did not. I don't think I did. I don't remember exactly how I came in it every time, but maybe I've heard that you can score a lot if you come in at a certain angle. I think in later incarnations of this game, they with the different skill levels and the tweaks to the AI, I've heard that will help make it more fun. And it's probably easier for beginners if you do it. Again, since we didn't review any of the expansions, I didn't install them or try them. So maybe someone out there can let us know. But just on the basis of the game as it appeared, and I have kept in mind this was 90. Things were still in development. So I try to grade everything on the curve of the era it was released. And like I said, graphically, it's a nice game, and it's playable. And probably with more than one person, maybe two players, it would be more fun, and we'll find out when we play this on the stream, because I haven't got to play anybody yet. But just as a single-player experience, not my cup of tea.
Yeah, agreed.
That much said, just for fun, I looked up what you could get this game for now. There are plenty of boxed copies available on our old pal eBay. Everything I saw was in the UK or Germany. So I didn't see it. So if you're in the States, you're going to be importing this bad boy, and then you're going to play the PAL game on your Amiga, because I'm sure, I don't know if they even released an NTSC version. They probably did, but I have no way of knowing. The game was going. The games that had already been sold had sold roughly between $5 and $17 American, or $3.25 to £11, and then. Everything that's currently up there was, I don't know why they're more expensive now, but I guess that people are trying to get a little more money for me. You're looking somewhere in the ballpark of $25 US, 16 pounds. So the game's out there, plenty are available. If it's your bag and you want to pick it up, it's no problem to get.
Great. Well, that's a fun little feature. I always like to see how much stuff is going for now. Video games are funny because it's rare to find a game that we talk about how games are this collectible medium, but it's rare to find a game that sells for more than its original purchase price. I mean, maybe 5% of all games ever released, if you were to buy them right now, would sell for more than they originally sold for in stores.
It's funny. You're right. And there's so many. You got to think of the history of all consoles and computers, but you can still get a good shake on a lot of computer games. They haven't held their value as much as your console games have for the most part. Now there are exceptions, but Amiga games. The problem we have over here in the States is just the lack of them. There just aren't as many. If you're over in the UK, you guys are living like gangbusters over there because there are plenty of options. You can find a 600 Amiga 600 at a boot sale somewhere, or pick up a TV Sports Football somewhere, cheap. But I mean, I'm telling you right now, I've never seen any Amiga stuff ever in like a thrift store. I've very rarely seen any Amiga stuff for sale ever over here, unless you're dealing with someone personally. So eBay is usually your only option. These prices are good. Of course, if you're in the U.S., you got to strap $9-10 on that for shipping overseas. You got to wait a couple weeks. It sucks. Yeah. But there's nothing you can do. That's the road we travel.
Well, I think that we've said all that we can say about Kickoff 2. Do you have anything else?
Well, obviously there was no score on this one. I can tell you I never won a game.
Now, but you did score on the computer.
No, I never scored.
Oh, I thought you said you did.
I attempted to score. I was in a position to score, but I never scored. I never scored, and I was never able to beat the computer, obviously. And I also usually generally got crushed. I played I'd say in the last week I've played about 10 matches and gave up on about 5 more.
See, I spent most of my time in the practice mode,
which I never went into once.
And like I said, there are no players on the other side in practice mode, but they do have a keeper, and so I tried relentlessly to score on him and managed to once.
How did you do as being the keeper?
You I don't think you have much control.
That's something else I could not understand, because maybe someone out there could point that out too. I thought I had him, and then I didn't. I never understood exactly how it worked.
Mine was pretty good. When I think I might have played 3 games against the computer, and the first game, I think that, as far as goals allowed, I think, maybe only like 2 a game or something like that. So my guy was doing his job. I think that I've read that you do have some control if you manage to move your joystick at just the right time. You'll assume control, but I don't know how that works.
It'd be interesting to know, and maybe Dino has mentioned this in an interview, but I mean, if that's the case, I will say the controls for this, there are subtle controller tips that you need to know if you're going to get really good, I would assume. And it's amazing that those could be programmed in.
Oh, yeah.
It always blows my mind that someone could actually put that in the game,
and especially when you think about, these are not analog controllers. These are on-off binary joysticks. And you've really got to have a deft hand. And it'll be interesting when you play it with the 360 stick, on the live stream, to see how different or the same that it is. Because I kept thinking, well, maybe on the Amiga stick, you can get a little bit, you have a lighter touch. But then I was thinking, no, because it's not analog. You're pushing up and it goes up. So
it's so quick and manic. I'm not sure it's going to make a difference. I played it originally on the Xbox stick, and then I switched over to my Wicco, and I love the Wicco. The Wicco's rock solid, but I don't think it helped a bit. Yeah. I think either one of them. So, it's soccer. So it's either like it or you don't. But guess what? I'm going to be that one guy that stands right in the middle of the fence and has no. So if you like it, great. If you like sensible soccer, we'll get to you.
Yeah. Sensible soccer will be on the list, but don't expect it for a little while.
Yeah. Or cricket, or
actually, you know what? Maybe we could do cricket. We could do cricket. Well, you might see cricket before you see sensible soccer.
Why not do darts too while we're at it? We'll do all the
I love
games.
A good darts game. Anyway, Aaron, what are we going to do next week?
Well, as you know, it's the Halloween season is upon us. So I thought next week we would pick up on that Halloween spirit to do a scary game for the Amiga. Me and my girlfriend just went to a little convention in Lexington, Kentucky called Scare Fest. And one of the neat things they had there was a cast reunion from the movie Fright Night, which was an awesome flick from back in the day. And it just so happens the Amiga has the Fright Night video game. So we're going to give that a whirl next week and see how scary it is.
That sounds great. Until next time.
Adios.